at a little after 7 p.m. The ballroom looked like a jewel box someone forgot to lock. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light onto velvet drapes, polished marble, and rows of bottles that cost more than my first car. I had curated every label myself, one by one, for this Metropolitan Charity Gala, because I needed tonight to be perfect. Not for ego. For rent, for school shoes, for a future that didn't wobble. I stood behind the featured display, holding a tasting glass, and I thought my whole life fit inside it until the music swelled and phone went silent. Being 31 in Manhattan usually means you fake confidence and hide exhaustion. I did both. My daughter Lily was 6, sleeping at my mother's apartment in Queens, and I had promised her I'd be home before midnight with a story and a kiss on her forehead. My boss had promised me a promotion if the investors loved our wine program. Grant Wilder, my fiancé, had promised we would finally stop living month to month once his Napa dream took shape. Tonight he was supposed to be somewhere in this glittering crowd, charming money into our future for Lily too. That's why I went looking. I slipped past servers carrying trays of oysters, past donors with tight smiles, past a photographer hunting for a headline. The featured display was our pride. A wall of rare reds and old-world whites arranged like art. Grant loved this corner because it made him look important. I rounded it, expecting to find him shaking hands. Instead, I found his hands where they didn't belong, pressed against the back of a woman in a silver dress. My sister's dress. Tessa's hair. Tessa's laugh, soft and familiar, in a place that suddenly felt foreign to me. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a glass. My body did something quieter and worse. It went cold, then hot, like the thermostat broke inside my ribs. The engagement ring on my finger felt heavier than the display. I remembered Grant sliding it on after Lily fell asleep on my couch, telling me we were building something real. I remembered Tessa hugging me at the engagement dinner, her cheek against mine, whispering congratulations into my hair. Now Grant's mouth was on hers, and her fingers were tangled in his tie, as if my life were a costume they could borrow. Some part of me, the part trained to identify a vintage by a single sip, cataloged details like evidence. The smear of lipstick at the corner of Grant's mouth. The angle of Tessa's chin, tilted like she was posing. The fact that my name badge was hanging from Grant's jacket because he forgot his. I stepped into their line of sight and watched the moment land. His shoulders jerked, her eyes narrowed. I felt myself become calm, the way I do before a service starts, when everyone expects you to lead, even if your hands are shaking inside your gloves. In my right hand, I still had a bottle I'd been presenting to a donor, the foil already cut, the cork half loosened. My grip tightened without permission. The cork gave way with a sharp pop that didn't match the jazz. Foam spilled over my knuckles, cold and sticky, and a few heads turned in unison. I could feel the ballroom's temperature change, that subtle hush that comes before gossip takes its first breath. Grant's face went pale. Tessa's smile stayed fixed. I wiped my hand on a linen napkin, pretending it was just clumsiness, not rage and heartbreak too. Lily hates it when grown-ups whisper. At her kindergarten recital last spring, she asked me why the other moms talked with their hands over their mouths, like secrets were candy they didn't want to share. That memory flashed through me as I sensed eyes sliding toward us. If this blew up, it wouldn't just be my pride on the floor. It would be my daughter's. A kid hears things in hallways. A teacher reads the internet. I swallowed hard, breathed through my nose, and held my spine straight. I could break later. Right now, I needed to stay standing there. I looked at Grant and realized I had been auditioning for his love the same way I auditioned for critics. Careful, controlled, always proving I deserved a seat at the table. He had taken that effort and traded it for a cheap thrill behind my own work. I looked at Tessa and felt a different kind of pain, older than romance, the ache of a sister who kept score. Maybe she always wanted my life. Maybe she just wanted me to lose. My anger settled into something clean. I was done. I turned away before my face could betray me. I moved too fast, weaving between tables like I was escaping a fire. The edge of my vision caught servers pausing, donors leaning closer, the photographer lifting his camera. I tried to find air, to find a hallway, to find anything that wasn't their breath on my neck. My heel snagged on the hem of my dress and I stumbled backward. I expected empty space. Instead, I hit something solid, warm, unmoving. A hand closed around my upper arm, steadying me with practiced certainty. Up close, I caught the scent of cedar and leather, and the room fell quieter again. Whoever I'd backed into didn't budge. His hand stayed on my arm, not gripping, just anchoring me, as if gravity was optional for everyone else. Up close, he smelled like cedar, leather, and something darker, like a match just struck. I lifted my head and saw a suit that fit like it was tailored to his bones, then a throat and a jaw that looked carved, not grown. A thin scar cut through his left brow. My pulse stumbled, then ran. Around us, conversations thinned to a hush, and the nearest guest stepped back, giving him space without thinking twice. I followed the ripple of fear on other faces before I looked back at Grant and Tessa. Grant had straightened, trying to wear confidence like a jacket, but his eyes kept flicking to the man holding me steady. Tessa's smile faltered for the first time all night. Somewhere behind a champagne tower, someone breathed a name the way people whisper a prayer they don't believe will work. Nico DeLuca. I knew it from industry rumors and society pages. The ghost investor. The quiet threat. The man you didn't photograph unless you wanted trouble. My stomach dropped, and my anger flared. In that second, fear and fury braided together. Grant had chosen my sister behind the wine I'd curated, at the event carrying my name on every program. If I walked away crying, I would be the sad story tomorrow. The woman who couldn't keep her fiancé. Lily would hear it eventually, even if I tried to shield her. I felt Nico's hand steady and patient, waiting for me to decide what kind of woman I was in public. I turned my face toward him, and, with a reckless calm, asked for one thing with my eyes. A kiss. Here. Now. He didn't look surprised so much as mildly amused, like he'd seen desperate people do desperate things and still expected them to mean what they did. His gaze moved over my face with slow precision, checking if I understood the risk I was taking. I tasted champagne on my own breath and hated that it made me brave. The ballroom seemed to inhale together. I felt Grant stare like heat between my shoulder blades. Nico's thumb brushed the edge of my jaw, a gentle permission that felt like a warning, too. Then he leaned in, enough to steal my air. When his mouth met mine, I told myself it was theater. A single scene to end my humiliation and start my exit. But the first touch was steady, unhurried, and it pulled something loose inside me. His hand slid to the back of my neck, not forcing, just guiding, and I realized he could have taken control and chose not to. That choice hit harder than the kiss. I tasted something smoky, expensive, and I forgot to breathe for a beat. The ballroom blurred into lights and distant jazz. My anger didn't vanish, but it stopped owning me completely anymore. Somewhere between the second breath and the third, the performance cracked. I felt the weight of his palm at my waist, and the way he held me upright as if he expected me to shake. I did. My knees went loose with shock and relief tangled together, and he adjusted without making it obvious. It wasn't just desire. It was the feeling of being seen at my worst and not being mocked for it. That terrified me more than Grant's betrayal. Safe and exposed at once, like standing on a rooftop with no railing. When he pulled back, I swayed. I turned in his arms and faced the damage. Grant looked like someone had slapped him with a wet towel, stunned and angry at the same time. Tessa's cheeks flushed a sharp red, the color she wore when we were teenagers and she'd been caught lying. I lifted my hand, stared at the ring that suddenly seemed ridiculous, and slid it off. The metal left a pale circle on my skin. I pressed the ring into Grant's open palm as I walked past him, and I didn't slow down. Behind me, the room erupted in whispers. Nico stayed behind me. That was when I noticed the other men. Dark suits near exits, not blocking, just existing with purpose. They weren't event staff, and they didn't need badges. Their presence made the ballroom feel like a room inside a larger, unseen building. Grant's anger tried to rise into a scene, but it fizzled the moment those men shifted their weight. Tessa reached for him, then thought better of it. I felt a surge of satisfaction so sharp it almost made me laugh. Instead, I lifted my chin and returned to the table, because my job remained, even if my heart wasn't. I served wine like nothing had happened, because that's what professionalism looks like when your life is on fire. I poured with steady hands while my insides rattled. Every time I caught my reflection, I saw smudged lipstick and hair escaping its pins, proof that I was human after all. Nico didn't hover. He stepped away with the kind of restraint that made people nervous, and the space he left felt louder than his presence. Guests kept glancing at me, at him, at the empty corner where Grant and Tessa had been, like they were watching rumor being born tonight. By the time the last donor left and the lights softened, my phone had turned into a vibrating brick in my clutch. Missed calls stacked up, and a gossip notification flashed grainy photos of me and the scarred man. My name sat beside his like it belonged there. I rode the staff elevator down and finally let my shoulders sag. I had to be up at 6:30 a.m. to pack Lily's lunch and sign her reading log, and I wondered if the parents would look at her differently because her mother made headlines. That thought hurt more than Grant. My mother's number lit up the screen before I reached the curb. She had a sense for disaster, and tonight my disaster had a photographer. When I answered, I didn't need words to know she'd seen everything. I could hear it in the silence, the inhale that meant she was choosing restraint. I imagined her pacing around her living room while Lily slept in her pajamas, unaware that her mom was becoming entertainment. I told my mother the truth in a voice that was steady, and through the line I felt her anger reroute from me to Grant and Tessa. In my apartment, the quiet hit like a second betrayal. My gala dress slid to the floor in a puddle of expensive fabric, and I stood in the bathroom staring at my own eyes as if they belonged to someone else. My phone kept buzzing with Ava Park's worry, but I couldn't answer. I washed my lipstick away and watched red swirl down the sink, wondering when I'd started treating love like a job interview. Somewhere under the anger was grief, and under the grief was a tiny spark of pride. I hadn't begged. I hadn't apologized. I'd survived tonight. I found the card when I emptied my clutch on the counter. Matte black, cool as stone, with a single number stamped in silver. No name, no logo, just certainty. I didn't remember him giving it to me, only the brief brush of his fingers when he finally stepped back at the gala. The message was clear without being written out. Tomorrow at 8 p.m., a car, a door opening into a world I shouldn't enter. I stared at the card until my coffee machine clicked off by itself. Dinner with Nico DeLuca. The thought felt parts warning and dare. I opened Lily's photo on my phone and stared until my throat tightened. She was 6, all missing teeth and fierce opinions, and she deserved a mother who didn't fold into shame. That thought fought with every alarm bell in my head. Nico DeLuca was danger with perfect manners, and I had no illusion about what a connection to him could cost. Still, Grant and Tessa had already taught me that playing safe doesn't prevent pain. It only makes you swallow it quietly. I slid the black card into my wallet. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. I would show up anyway. By 6:30 a.m., my apartment smelled like toast and panic. Lily was at the tiny kitchen table, swinging her legs, reading the same picture book for the 3rd day in a row. My phone kept lighting up with notifications I didn't open. I packed her lunch anyway. Apple slices, a peanut-free granola bar, and the little note she pretends not to care about. Last night's kiss was still on my mouth like a bruise. But Lily needed a calm mom, not a scandal. I told myself I could fall apart later. After drop-off, after dishes, after I earned privacy. On the walk to school, she held my hand with the authority of a queen, pointing out a dog in a sweater and a sticker on a lamppost. At the gate, I kissed her hair and watched her disappear into the building. Then I stood there longer than I should have, feeling my chest tighten. What would you do if a child depended on you and temptation knocked anyway? My mother texted a warning. Ava texted an eye roll, and I kept staring at the black card in my wallet like it was a dare. 8 p.m. rang in head. That afternoon, I went through the motions at work, smiling at clients who pretended they hadn't seen the photos. I signed invoices, corrected a delivery count, and scheduled next week's tasting as if my engagement hadn't died in public. At 5 p.m., I picked Lily up, listened to her story about glitter glue, and made macaroni while she colored at my feet. After her bath, I braided her damp hair and felt the weight of my choices settle on my shoulders like a wet coat. When she finally slept, I stared at my closet, choosing between fear and control again. I didn't pick a dress that begged to be noticed. I picked one that looked like armor. Simple black, long sleeves, clean lines, nothing to tug or adjust. The pearls Lily's grandmother gave me sat at my throat, a reminder that I came from women who survived harder years than this. I left a note for Mom about Lily's breakfast and packed tomorrow's snack bag before I even touched mascara. My hands shook anyway. I kept whispering to myself that one dinner didn't make me reckless. Still, I double-checked the door lock, like danger could slip in behind a headline. At 8 p.m., a dark sedan waited at the curb, glossy but understated, the kind of expensive you only notice if you know what to look for. The driver opened the door without a word and I climbed in, smoothing my skirt like I could smooth my nerves. Manhattan slid past the tinted windows, all neon and wet pavement. I watched couples on sidewalks and wondered if any of them were holding secrets. My phone buzzed once with Mom's check-in, and I answered fast, pretending my voice was steady. The driver stayed silent, like the car itself had rules tonight. We turned into Tribeca and stopped beside a renovated warehouse with no sign, just a doorman who barely glanced at me before waving us through. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of stone and citrus. The elevator required a key card I didn't have, and that tiny fact made my pulse spike. I told myself I could walk out at any moment. I also knew I wouldn't. The ride up was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Fast, then slower, as if my body argued with my brain. When the doors opened, my stomach dropped, like stepping off cliffs. The penthouse was a calm ocean of space and light. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the skyline like a postcard someone had paid to own. Furniture was minimal, soft leather and pale wood, nothing cluttered, nothing sentimental. Then my eyes caught the art. A small bronze figure on a plinth looked older than the country. A painting near the dining area had that haunted, museum-quality depth that makes you lean in. I didn't say the obvious thought out loud, but it pressed against my teeth. This didn't belong here. And Nico was watching me notice. His stillness felt like a question, too. He wasn't in a suit this time. Dark slacks, a white shirt, sleeves pushed up, forearms marked with faint lines like he'd actually worked for something once. He offered me a glass and waited, giving me space to decide. I hated how much I appreciated that. I walked closer, and the air between us changed, thick with memory. When he kissed me again, it was slow, deliberate, like he was asking without words. I could have turned away. I didn't. The kiss didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like consent becoming chemistry. For a moment, I forgot the ballroom. Then Lily's face flashed in my head, the way it always does when I start floating. My daughter didn't need a mother who chased thrills. She needed a mother who chose wisely, even when her heart was loud. I stepped back enough to breathe, letting the cool air steady me. Nico didn't chase me. He simply watched, patient, as if he understood that my life came with a bedtime and a school calendar. That quiet restraint pulled me in harder than any aggressive move could have. I realized with a jolt I was curious about who I became near him. He set a bottle on the table like it was a sacred object, dark glass and a label so understated it felt arrogant. I didn't recognize it from any legal distributor list, which should have scared me more than it did. He poured with the kind of care I'd only seen from old sommeliers in Paris. The first sip tasted like black cherries, smoked cedar, and the clean bite of winter air. Then it opened, softer, deeper, like a story that starts harsh and ends warm. I closed my eyes without meaning to. Wine has always been my safest language. I described flavors to myself the way I used to when Lily was a baby and I couldn't afford childcare, in snapshots, in stolen seconds. The wine reminded me of late nights studying for certification exams, of subway rides with sore feet, of the first time I realized I could build a life with my own hands. It also reminded me of the gala, the foam spilling over my fingers the moment my trust snapped. Nico listened, like my palate mattered as much as my body. He listened, and I felt taken seriously. That respect hit me harder than alcohol. Eventually, I couldn't pretend my life was only Manhattan and wine lists. I told him, carefully, that a 6-year-old was waiting for me to be a grown-up, not a headline. I explained Lily's routines the way other women describe careers. Pick-up times, reading logs, the rule about no peanuts, the nightlight she still needs. I didn't ask him to accept it. I stated it like a fact. If being near him meant danger, it would touch her too. And that was the line I would never cross. Nico's expression softened just enough to show he heard me and respected it. We ate something simple but perfect, a meal that didn't need applause. Nico's attention never drifted. It landed, stayed, and waited, like he was measuring what mattered to me. When my phone buzzed, he didn't react, yet I felt him clock the pull of my outside life. I tried to keep the topic on wine, but Grant's shadow kept sliding across my thoughts. The moment Grant's last name surfaced, I saw a shift in Nico's focus, subtle as a blade turning. That tiny change was a twist in my stomach. This dinner wasn't only desire, it was information for me. I kept thinking this was insane, but it didn't sound funny inside me. My life runs on careful steps, school calendars, savings, and the kind of stability Lily can feel in her bones. Here, everything was velvet quiet and too powerful to be casual. Nico looked at me like I was rare instead of convenient, and that attention was intoxicating in a way I didn't trust. I wanted to lean in. I also wanted to sprint home and lock every door. I checked the time, doing the math to make sure Lily's morning wouldn't suffer for my night at all. Nico set a slim folder beside my glass and didn't open it. He watched me notice, like he was measuring whether I could handle what was inside. My thoughts ran to Grant's vineyard promises and the cracks I'd ignored. Nico's calm felt like proof he already knew the debts and weak points. I didn't ask, but my stomach understood anyway. The night shifted from chemistry into something practical. As I reached for my coat, I knew he hadn't invited me here just for wine. The real conversation was waiting for tomorrow morning. And somehow, I knew I would say yes. My apartment swallowed me in silence. I checked my phone first and found the photo Mom sent of Lily asleep, mouth slightly open, one arm around her stuffed rabbit. Relief loosened my throat. Then guilt arrived, quick and hot, followed by something I hated admitting. Anticipation. I washed my hands, but the night clung anyway. In bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the folder Nico set beside my glass. Whatever he'd gathered about, Grant wasn't curiosity. It was leverage, and leverage always costs something. When sleep finally came, it felt like a pause before weather. Tomorrow would decide everything. I woke on crisp linen that smelled faintly of cedar, and for a second I forgot where I was. Then my phone flashed the school app reminder for Lily's reading log, and reality slammed back. My throat tightened with desire, guilt, and the sharp fear of being the kind of mother who disappears into her own drama. I checked the sitter text from my mom first, then the weather, then the time. Like routines could steady me. Outside Nico's windows, the city looked calm. Inside my chest, everything rattled, but I forced myself to breathe. Today would not be simple. Nico was already awake, sleeves rolled, espresso steaming beside a slim folder. He did not crowd me. He made space, the way powerful men do when they want you to step forward on your own. The folder held printouts, maps, and numbers about Grant Wilder's family vineyard in the Hudson Valley. I recognized the address from engagement daydreams, and my stomach turned. Debt schedules, overdue equipment leases, unpaid distributor invoices. Nico had studied it like a battlefield and found it weak. His offer was clean purchase, legal paperwork, and a future that would sting, all of it aimed at Grant. I had come expecting a dangerous dinner and a goodbye, not a blueprint. My mind flashed to Grant's speeches about legacy, his earnest promises made while I cooked Lily's pasta. Now those promises looked like paint over rot. A hot satisfaction rose, then cooled into anxiety. This was not petty jealousy. It was a lever that could change my life and embarrass my sister too. I pictured Tessa's smug face at the gala and felt my jaw set. Nico's calm made it clearer. He had not stumbled into my scandal. He was choosing to reshape it. It scared me anyway. I set my coffee down and made myself think like the beverage director who negotiates contracts, not the woman with a broken engagement. If Nico wanted me in this, I would not be a decoration. I laid out my conditions in my head, clear as tasting notes. I needed full control over every wine decision, grapes, barrel program, blends, distribution. My name had to be on the label, not his, not a mystery company. Lily needed protection too, a trust set aside that nobody could touch. And I needed boundaries. No ownership of me, no games with my time. Ever. Nico listened without interrupting, then slid the folder closer, as if handing me the wheel. He tapped a page where the vineyard's value floated around $8 million on paper, then another page showing what the debt was doing to it in real life. He did not promise romance. He offered structure, attorneys, accountants, and a purchase routed through entities so ordinary they could pass an audit. When I insisted the deed land in my name, he nodded once and made a call. Watching him move, I understood the truth. This man treated problems like puzzles, and he had decided I mattered. The next week blurred into signatures and silence. I met Nico's legal team in a glass office where nobody asked how we met, only what I wanted protected. Documents arrived in neat stacks. Emails from Grant arrived too, swinging from pleading to threatening, each one reminding me how little he had respected me. Tessa sent messages that dripped with family obligation, as if blood erased betrayal. I blocked both after my hands stopped shaking. Nico never told me what to do. He simply placed options in front of me like cards. Every choice felt heavy, but it was mine. Always. When the sale closed, Nico drove me north before sunrise, and the city gave way to frost and vines. The Wilder vineyard looked smaller than Grant described, fences sagging, trellises bent, a press that smelled like mildew and regret. I walked the rows and saw mistakes everywhere. Wrong rootstock for the soil, uneven pruning, signs of disease they had ignored. That hit hard. Grant's dream had never been about craft. It had been about a story he could sell, even if the grapes died under it. My anger shifted into focus. This place could be saved, but not with lies. I made a list the way I make a wine list, ruthless and hopeful. New stainless tanks, temperature control, clean hoses, lab testing, and a press that would not punish the fruit. We ordered trellis repair, replaced broken posts, and brought in a vineyard manager who spoke to the plants like they were contracts. I chose varietals that fit the soil instead of Grant's fantasies, and I planned a barrel program that would build structure without hiding flaws. Nico's people moved fast, too fast sometimes, but I forced the pace to match my standards. I wanted excellence, not a souvenir. Back in the city, my days split in half. Mornings were Lily's pancakes, backpacks, and me pretending the parents at school were not scanning my face. Afternoons were calls with contractors and tastings of trial blends. Nights were homework, bedtime stories, then spreadsheets after Lily slept. Ava worried I was trading one bad man for a darker one, and her concern landed like a bruise. I reminded myself I was not chasing romance. I was building something for Lily, with terms written in ink. Still, I checked the lock twice, because bravery never cancels fear. Not in my body yet. Joyce arrived one Saturday with groceries and that look that means she has been reading headlines. She did not scold me about the kiss. She scolded me about risk. Her love always comes dressed as anger. She reminded me Lily needed stability, that men like Nico collect trouble. Then she saw the vineyard plans across my table, the budgets, the timelines, the way my hands steadied when I talked about soil and barrels. Her face softened, just slightly. She still disapproved, but she could not deny what I was building. That shift felt like permission to keep going for now. I did not let Nico meet Lily until I could control the setting. It happened on a Sunday afternoon at the vineyard, with daylight and my mother nearby. Lily stepped out in purple sneakers and stared at the vines like they were magic. Nico stayed a respectful step back and let her come close on her terms. He crouched to her height, hands visible, and offered nothing but attention. Lily asked if he liked grapes. His answer was gentle and plain, and my throat tightened. He did not treat her like an accessory. He treated her like someone who mattered. Afterward, Lily ran between the rows, collecting fallen leaves, and I watched Nico watch her, careful and quiet. A flicker of hope rose, dangerous as a spark near gasoline. I imagined a future where Lily did not hear whispers about her mother's mistakes, where the vineyard was just home, where a man could be steady. Then I shut the thought down, because hope makes you careless. Nico's world had sharp corners, and I could not let my daughter bleed on them. I told myself this was business, structure, and a shared goal. If feelings grew, they would earn space slowly. Work accelerated. I sat with a designer choosing fonts that felt clean and confident. The label read Reynolds Reserve, and seeing my name printed made my eyes burn. Distributors who once brushed past me returned my calls about the vineyard's rebirth. I negotiated contracts with the calm I used to pour for donors, except now I was pouring for my own future. We updated the cellar, fixed the tasting room, and set aside a rack for bottles I would save for Lily's milestones. Nico stayed in the background, but his reach kept doors opening. It thrilled and unsettled me deeply. Grant did not vanish gracefully. He sent messages that swung from apology to threats, and he hinted at lawsuits over the vineyard sale. Tessa called my mother, crying about family, as if she had not been the knife in my back. I felt the old reflex to appease, to keep peace. Then I pictured Lily learning that women must stay quiet to be loved, and my stomach turned. I saved every message, forwarded everything to the attorneys, and stopped answering. At night, I lay awake, not from heartbreak, but from vigilance. What I was building had enemies, and they hunted. By late September, the vineyard smelled like fresh wood and possibility. We set a date for the reopening and called it Harvest Night. I sent invitations to critics, restaurant buyers, and the investors Grant once chased. Staff practiced pours in the renovated tasting room, while I adjusted lighting and music like it was my own gala. The first barrels of Reynolds Reserve rested in oak, young but promising. I caught myself smiling at the sound of laughter in a place that used to feel dead. Then I swallowed the joy, because joy can make you sloppy. Still, we moved forward. One afternoon, I walked the rows alone after the crew left, boots sinking into damp earth. The vines were tied straight and breathing. I thought about the version of me who laughed at Grant's jokes about my obsession, who apologized for caring. I had wanted partnership so badly that I accepted being tolerated. Out here, with soil on my hands, I felt necessary and capable. The wind smelled like crushed leaves and rain, and for the first time since the gala, my chest loosened. Revenge started this, but purpose carried it now. That truth was quiet, and it was strong. Rumors traveled faster than shipments. A blog called me the Mafia Sommelier, like my profession was a costume. At Lily's school, a parent asked, too casually, whether everything was okay at home. I smiled and signed the field trip form. That night I told Lily that grown-ups make messy choices and still try to do right, and I held her longer at bedtime. I did not mention Nico, or Grant, or Tessa. I just promised stability with my body. The next morning I drove to the vineyard and worked until my hands ached, because work is what I can control. 2 days before harvest night, a gray sedan sat at the edge of the property for hours. It never entered, Never left, just waited. When I pointed it out, Nico's security acted calm too quickly. Later I saw Nico on the veranda, phone to his ear, eyes fixed on the horizon. When he ended the call, the air felt heavier. My mind went to Lily. Always Lily. I pictured her hands and the way danger can arrive wearing a suit. I told myself I was paranoid, that rumors had trained me to see shadows. Still, I counted exits like bottles. That night, while Lily slept, I reviewed notes. An unknown number sent an emoji, and my pulse jumped. I deleted it, but it clung to my thoughts. I wanted answers from Nico, yet I knew his world rarely gives explanations. Harvest night was close, and the vineyard looked alive. I refused to let fear steal it, or let Grant and Tessa win by making me shrink. Still, I felt a countdown, like a cork working loose. If law enforcement was circling Nico, it would circle me too. I tucked Lily's lunch note into my wallet and chose to stand tall. The afternoon before harvest night, Nico asked me to walk with him along the back rows where the vines hid us from guests and staff. His voice stayed low, but I didn't need words to feel the weight of what he was saying. The gray sedan I had noticed was not a random neighbor. Federal eyes had been tracking his world for months, closing in with patience and paperwork. He wanted the vineyard completely separated from him, stamped clean, owned by me alone, so Lily and I wouldn't be dragged under. Even calm felt like a door shutting behind us. I had expected him to pull me closer, to claim me the way rumors said he claimed everything. Instead, he was pushing me into the light, away from the blast radius. The reversal made my stomach twist. Part of me felt used, like a chess piece placed for his protection, and part of me felt cared for in a way I hadn't known how to ask for. My first instinct was to run home and wrap my arms around Lily, to pretend I never met him. My second instinct was to stand still and choose my own terms. Right then, that night I packed Lily's backpack twice, checking for her library book and the permission slip she'd crumpled into a ball. I cooked, cleaned, and listened to her talk about a classmate who stole crayons, small betrayals that still mattered at 6. I kept smiling, because she deserved a mom who felt safe. After she fell asleep, I stood in the hallway staring at her door, wondering how many stories the internet could invent about me. Safety, I realized, wasn't just locks and schedules. It was also reputation, and reputation was fragile. By sunrise, I promised I would not shrink. Harvest night arrived with a cold, clear sky and the smell of wood smoke from neighbors' fireplaces. We strung lights along the tasting room beams, set polished glasses in straight lines, and poured the first bottles of Reynolds Reserve like we were christening a ship. Critics from the city arrived in sleek coats, their eyes sharp, their compliments cautious. I kept my posture tall and my hands steady, the way I had at the gala, except this time the room was mine. Nico stayed slightly behind me, present but quiet, letting me own the moment. Lily waved from Joyce's side. When I spoke about the barrel program and the soil, I felt my old confidence return, not borrowed from any man. People nodded, took notes, asked for allocations. The vineyard that Grant had dismissed as his inheritance was now listening to me. I should have been only proud, but a thin wire of dread ran under every smile. I kept scanning the driveway, expecting headlights that didn't belong. Nico's security blended into the crowd like shadows under light. Every time I caught Nico's eyes, I felt him measuring distance, as if he were counting exits for me, not for himself. They arrived just after sunset, when the sky turned the color of bruised peach and the first toasts started. Grant wore a tailored coat and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tessa clung to his arm like she'd won a prize. The room shifted as if someone opened a freezer door. I felt my throat tighten. Then I felt something steadier rise, a anger that didn't need a scene. People recognized them from gossip, and their curiosity sharpened. Nico moved one step closer behind me, not touching, just existing like a wall. Grant's gaze snagged on him and faltered. Grant tried to take over the space with gestures, pointing at the vineyard like it was still his. Tessa's eyes searched faces for allies, for anyone willing to shame me back into my place. I could feel the trap they were setting, the story where I was naive, where Nico was manipulating me, where my success was stolen instead of earned. A critic I respected paused mid-sip, waiting to see if I would crack. My heart hammered, but my voice stayed even in my head. I stepped forward and let my work speak first, offering pours, explaining decisions, answering questions. I didn't defend my love life. I defended my competence. I pointed to contracts, permits, and the public records that proved the sale was legal and the rebuild was mine. I watched the room relax as people realized there was nothing scandalous about competence, only about betrayal. Grant's face tightened when applause rose for the wine, not for his drama. Tessa's posture wilted when no one rushed to comfort her. I let myself feel one clean win, sharp and satisfying. Nico stayed silent beside me, and in his stillness I felt support without ownership. For a moment, I breathed again. After the guests left, I walked the tasting room, collecting abandoned programs and half-empty glasses, letting the quiet settle. The night should have ended there, in pride and exhaustion. Instead, Nico's warning echoed in my body, a reminder that success attracts attention. He watched from the doorway, a man who looked untouchable and still acted like he was planning for loss. Lily fell asleep in the farmhouse bed with her rabbit under her chin, safe for now. I stood at the window deciding what safety would cost next. When Nico's phone lit, his expression went flat, and the air chilled. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, my phone erupted while I checked Lily's homework folder. Alerts stacked like falling plates. Nico's Soho gallery had been raided, agents in windbreakers carrying boxes for cameras. My hands went numb as headlines stitched my name to his like a warning label. Joyce called, then Ava, fear loud in their pauses. I didn't answer. I told Lily we were running late, kissed her forehead, and drove her to school with my jaw locked. The moment she disappeared inside, I turned the car toward Manhattan. Love felt dangerous again, but leaving felt worse still. Nico's building looked the same, discreet and polished, but the lobby air felt strained, like everyone had heard sirens. The elevator rose in silence. When the doors opened, his television looped footage of agents hauling framed art under plastic. Nico stood by the window with an untouched drink, shoulders rigid. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired. The sight cracked something in me. I crossed the room and pressed my palm to his back, anchoring him. I felt him exhale, slow and controlled, allowing me close to spite himself. In that moment I understood his world always ends in raids eventually. He showed me papers from his attorneys, outlines of charges they expected, the way a prosecutor could frame years of gray into one ugly story. He made it clear he wouldn't trade anyone else's freedom to save his own. I watched his jaw tighten, the scar on his brow pulling, and I realized how much control he was forcing into stillness. He wanted me to disappear from his orbit before cameras found me again. He wanted the vineyard to prove I was separate, clean, safe. My pride flared, then fear answered. I pictured Lily at school, and my stomach knotted. I drove back with thoughts racing faster than the headlights. I wanted to protect Lily from gossip, and from whatever storm might follow Nico, but I refused to be managed like a liability. At home, I watched Lily eat cereal and tell me about a spelling test, and I realized my life had already been dragged through mud by Grant's betrayal. Hiding wouldn't clean it. Building would. I called Camila Torres, an attorney I trusted, and asked for advice. Not because I planned to confess, but because I planned to protect my child. I chose to stand beside Nico anyway. That night I returned to Nico's penthouse with Camila's number saved and my courage reheated. Nico looked composed, but his eyes held a fracture, like glass waiting. He made it clear the case was real and moving fast. He kept circling back to Lily, my name, the vineyard, as if those were the only clean things he could protect. Then he asked to marry me. Not a fairy tale, not a party, just a legal vow before the storm. The request hit me like a match. I felt fear, and I felt love, and I hated that both were true. I stared at the city and thought about Lily's future and my own spine. Marrying Nico would tie me to every headline and whisper in the school parking lot. It would also give me clarity and a promise I could hold when everything turned uncertain. Grant's ring had offered romance and delivered betrayal. I had already been judged for surviving. I would rather be judged for choosing. I turned back and agreed, slow and deliberate, not because I was blinded, but because I was deciding. I silently set boundaries. Lily first, my name on the vineyard, autonomy intact, no compromises. We planned nothing grand. 2 days later, before dawn, Nico drove to the vineyard house while I packed Lily's overnight bag and asked Joyce to keep her calm. Camila arrived with papers, efficient and unsentimental. A retired judge appeared quietly with a Bible and a pen. I wore a simple cream dress I already owned, because buying white felt like tempting fate. Nico wore a dark suit and a watch that ticked too loud. The ceremony would be short, not to hide, but to protect. If the world wanted a story, we would write our own first page right now. Lily walked in holding a small bunch of grapes, proud like she'd invented harvest. She looked from me to Nico with curiosity, and I felt my heart tighten. I had feared she would be frightened, but she wanted to know we meant what we were doing. Nico knelt to her height, hands open, and waited for her comfort before standing. That patience mattered more than flourish. The judge spoke softly. I took Nico's hand and felt how steady he was. Afterward, he touched his lips to my forehead, and I felt the promise land on me and the child watching. We did not celebrate with crowds. We ate soup in the farmhouse kitchen while Lily colored and Joyce pretended not to watch us. Nico's phone stayed face down, but tension lived in his shoulders. After Lily slept, we walked the rows under stars, and I felt peace braided with panic. I was married to a man the government wanted, yet I felt clearer, because I had chosen. The vineyard was mine. Lily was safe tonight. Still, when a car passed on the road, my body flinched. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, cameras, and court dates, and I would need to stand. By week's end, my phone rang nonstop. Reporters wanted proof my life was collapsing. Joyce insisted Lily stay invisible, and I agreed. Camila prepared filings and timelines, warning me that court turns love into evidence. Nico stayed calm, but I saw the strain in his jaw and the way he watched Lily like a memory he feared losing. I kept moving. Lunches, school drop-offs, harvest planning, inventory at midnight. Structure was armor. Still, trip into Manhattan felt like approaching a stage where strangers would judge our vows. I wasn't Mia Reynolds anymore. I was Nico DeLuca's wife, walking toward trial. The trial began in late winter, and Manhattan looked like it was holding its breath. Every morning I walked through a barricade of cameras with Lily's lunchbox smell still on my hands, because I had packed her snack before dawn. Flashbulbs turned the courthouse steps into a stage. People said my name like it belonged to a character, not a mother who still paid for after school. Inside, the air was dry and cold. Nico sat at the defense table, perfectly still, and I learned how loud silence can be. Camila Torres sat beside me, stone steady, taking notes for survival too. Days blurred into each other. A loop of metal detectors, wood benches, and whispered commentary I pretended not to hear. I watched jurors study spreadsheets as if numbers could explain a human being. Prosecutors built a story where Nico was a monster in a suit, and I was either stupid or bought. The worst part was how easily strangers believed it. At night I drove back to the vineyard, hands cramped on the wheel, practicing a smile for Lily's morning. In the dark cellar, I tasted unfinished wine and wondered if endurance had a flavor. I decided I would learn. On the 73rd day, Grant Wilder appeared in the hallway outside the courtroom, hair slicked back, expression rehearsed. Seeing him after everything felt like biting foil. He avoided my eyes until he couldn't. Then his mouth tightened as if I had stolen something that belonged to him. When he took the stand, the prosecutors guided him toward a neat narrative. Nico targeted me. Nico used me. The vineyard was a trap. I sat still, palms pressed together, reminding myself that truth is not a feeling. It is a timeline. Grant had always preferred stories, but Camila carried receipts in binders. Camila's cross was surgical without being cruel. She laid out financial records showing the Wilder vineyard bleeding long before Nico bought anything. She stacked dates like cards. My broken engagement, the legal offer, the closing, my management contract. Grant tried to smear the sequence, but paper did not bend with his ego. The jury watched him stumble through explanations that sounded thin beside hard numbers. I felt a small, private satisfaction. Not because he suffered, but because Lily would grow up seeing that lies can be challenged. Outside, reporters still wanted a scandal, yet the room felt steadier each day. The verdict came in December, gray light pooling on the courthouse floor. Nico was found guilty on money laundering and gray market trading, not on the violent fantasies tabloids whispered about. The judge spoke in a flat rhythm, and the number landed like a stone. 6 years. Eligible for parole after 4. I did not cry in the courtroom. I kept my face still because cameras love tears. Nico turned once, eyes steady, and I understood he was trying to memorize me. When the marshals led him away, my lungs forgot how to work. I stayed upright, then broke in private. In the parking garage, I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and finally let sound escape, small and ugly. Then my phone buzzed with a school reminder and I wiped my face with the sleeve of my coat. Lily needed a ride home, dinner, and a mother who could answer questions without shaking. I drove to Queens, picked her up from my mother's apartment, and listened to her describe her day in careful detail, as if my attention could anchor her. That night I tucked her in and stared at the ceiling, tasting fear like metal until sleep returned. Nico was sent to a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania, close enough that I could manage visits every other weekend. The first visit felt like walking into a different planet. Fluorescent lights, Plastic chairs. Rules posted everywhere. We were allowed a quick greeting and a quick goodbye, and the rest was conversation with hands kept to ourselves. I memorized the lines in his face, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way his posture refused to collapse. Driving back to the vineyard afterward, I screamed once, alone, then swallowed it and bought groceries for Lily, then myself. Life became a schedule with sharp edges. Tuesdays and Thursdays meant phone calls that had to fit between Lily's bath and bedtime stories. Letters came in the mail, his handwriting steady, mine cramped from writing during lunch breaks. I learned to talk about small things. The vines sleeping through winter, Lily losing her first tooth, the way snow makes the fields look clean. I never described how lonely the bed felt. In the mornings I did school drop-off, then drove to the cellar to check barrels, because wine does not pause for grief. Neither do children, nor did my heart. Spring brought buds and a new label, and with it, attention I didn't ask for. A magazine called Reynolds Reserve a breakthrough, and suddenly distributors wanted allocations that used to be reserved for bigger estates. I hired a full staff and paid them on time, something the Wilders had stopped doing. I spent long nights blending, tasting, spitting, writing notes until my tongue went numb. When the first vintage won a regional award, I held the plaque in the quiet office and let myself smile, not because it proved them wrong, but because it proved I was still here standing. Ava stopped calling after a while. At first she sent warnings, articles, worried emojis, as if fear could be forwarded like a link. Then the messages slowed, and silence filled the space where friendship used to be. I didn't blame her. She had chosen safety in the way many people do, by stepping away from anything complicated. Joyce, meanwhile, kept showing up with groceries, pretending it was just convenience. She asked fewer questions about Nico, and more about Lily's spelling tests. It was her version of acceptance, cautious and imperfect. I took it anyway. Motherhood teaches you to accept help. Grant tried to claw back control through lawyers and rumors. He filed claims suggesting the vineyard sale had been forced, then leaked hints that my success was purchased, not earned. Tessa played the sister card in public, posting about betrayal and family as if she hadn't lit the match. Camila handled it with calm precision. The case was dismissed quickly, and the gossip lost oxygen when nothing illegal appeared on paper. Still, Lily heard whispers on the playground. An afternoon she asked why people looked at me like I was on television. I told her adults confuse loud with true. Seasons became my calendar for missing him. In harvest time I crushed fruit until my arms ached, then drove to visit Nico with grape stains still under my nails. In winter I pruned canes in bitter wind and wrote letters in the truck with numb fingers. Spring brought buds and parole rumors that felt like superstition. Summer brought tourists and a tasting room full of strangers who wanted a glimpse of the scandal. I learned to smile and pour while my stomach twisted. The rules never changed, but our rhythm did. We learned to say enough without naming the worst. By the second year, money stopped being the fear under every decision. The vineyard sales and a few conservative investments Nico had arranged before sentencing meant I could pay staff well and still put funds aside for Lily's college. That security didn't erase loneliness, but it took the edge off panic. Critics started coming for the wine, not for the gossip. When a Michelin-starred restaurant signed a contract, I sat on the cellar steps and let myself breathe for the first time in months. I was no longer a woman attached to a headline. I was maker of something real. Joyce visited the vineyard in the third year, arriving unannounced and barefaced, like she had chosen honesty over performance. She walked the rows slowly, reading my name on shipping boxes as if checking it was real. I watched her take in the renovated tasting room, the staff who knew me, the way Lily ran ahead like this place belonged to her. My mother still disliked Nico's past, but her anger had softened into concern, then into reluctant pride. She told me, carefully, that my father would have admired the work. I carried that sentence like a medal on hard days. Some nights I opened Nico's last letter and reread the same line until it blurred, not because it was poetic, but because it was steady. I kept his absence from turning into a shrine by staying busy, yet grief still showed up in quiet corners. I missed the weight of his hand on my back when crowds pressed too close. I missed the way he watched Lily like she mattered. I also missed the version of myself who felt protected without feeling smaller. To survive, I learned love was repetition and responsibility, practiced daily even when the world refused understanding. In the fourth year, parole became more than a rumor. Camila prepared letters from employees and community leaders who could testify to Nico's discipline and my stability. I gathered records of visits and proof that the vineyard operated cleanly in my name. Lily grew taller and more aware, asking why our drives ended at a prison and why hugs were timed. I answered with honesty scaled to her age, telling her we were waiting for someone we loved to come home. At night, I rehearsed hope the way I rehearsed tasting notes, slow and precise, terrified of being wrong again. The week of the hearing, I stopped counting days and started counting breaths. I laid out Lily's outfit for school, then mine for the courthouse, as if fabric could decide fate. The vineyard ran like a machine now, staff confident, barrels labeled, orders scheduled months ahead. I should have felt safe, but safety had changed shape. It now meant preparedness. I packed snacks for Lily, paperwork for Camila, and a notebook with what Nico meant to us, without romance as a crutch. Standing at the edge of this threshold, I could taste two futures: heartbreak again, or finally home soon. Camila sat beside me at the parole hearing, calm as a metronome, while my leg bounced under the table. I had packed Lily's lunch at dawn and driven her to school before we came here, because my life never stopped being a mother's schedule. The air smelled like old paper and disinfectant. My palms were damp. Nico's file was on the board's desk, and I watched their eyes move over lines that had already stolen 4 years from us. When the decision came, it arrived without drama, just a quiet nod from the world. Parole. After 4 years of counting visits and letters, I almost folded in my chair. Camila's hand hovered near my elbow, ready to catch me, and I forced a breath into my ribs. I left the building feeling light and terrified at once, like hope had become something physical. On early Wednesday morning, Lily and I stood outside the prison gates with cold wind pushing through our jackets. She held my hand with the fierce patience of a child who has waited half her life. I watched the door until it opened and Nico stepped out thinner, older, but unmistakably him. My throat tightened so hard I thought I might choke. I moved first, then Lily, and he caught us like we were the only real things left in the world. The drive back to the Hudson Valley felt unreal, a quiet movie with no soundtrack. Nico's hand rested on my knee, steady, and Lily fell asleep in the back seat with her rabbit tucked under her chin. When the vineyard appeared, rows of vines waking in spring light, Nico went still. I realized he was seeing what he had risked everything to return to. I led him to the new cellar, cool and clean, lined with bottles that carried my name. In the center sat one display case. Inside was a legendary bottle I had hunted down in secret, the kind collectors whisper about, worth $200,000. I didn't explain how. I just watched his face soften as he understood what it meant. Time held still, a promise kept, a future we could finally drink in. We didn't open it that day. We let it sit like a lighthouse in the cellar while Nico took a shower and Lily drew vines on scrap paper at the kitchen table. I made grilled cheese, because moments still need ordinary food. Later we walked the rows together, and Nico listened as Lily named each trellis like it was a pet. Watching him slow his steps to match hers, I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in years. Home sounded like breathing. Later, when the house was quiet, Nico laid his palm over mine, and I felt him choose the hard road out loud and clear. No more gray corners, no more thrills that cost Lily her peace. I told him the truth I had learned. The glow-up wasn't marrying a dangerous man. It was choosing myself, building a legacy, and letting love survive consequences without erasing them. Sometimes I think about that first reckless kiss, how it began as a shield and turned into a doorway. Grant's betrayal lit the match, but it was my choice that built the fire into warmth. If you were me, with a child to protect and a life to rebuild, would you have walked away from Nico or stepped closer anyway? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.